it's truly a battle. I mean, to show a video like yours this week, I mean, all it does is make the case that capitalism is a more freedom-based system than socialism, which is like saying the sun is warmer than Antarctica. I mean, it's not a debatable issue. So I have a question. I want to get to the part two that I asked. I have a lot of questions because I like your mind. And that is the one I asked before. Is there a capitalism problem when a handful of companies seem to own almost everything?
Yes, I would say there is, because ultimately we are not defending an economic system indifferent to the results it produces. Very important for us to keep this in mind whenever we think about liberty in general, that we defend liberty, but we don't defend liberty indifferent to how the liberty is used. I think there's a line to this effect that Burke uses in the Reflections on the Revolution in France. He goes, before I congratulate you on liberty, I would want to know how your liberty is being exercised. And I think the same is true with the free market. The free market is a means and not an end. So imagine if you had a free market controlled by one guy. That would be a monopoly. The entire market is run, let's say, by Jeff Bezos. That would not be a good thing. Now, why would we want a market that's controlled by 10 guys? That's a sort of oligopoly. You've got a handful of guys, and they have all the control. We know that in other areas of freedom, it's almost always a bad thing. Look, for example, at digital media. By tragic misfortune, it is the case that the leading digital platforms are essentially controlled by about 5 people. This is true of Twitter, Jack Dorsey. It's true of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, and there are a handful of others. Now, why should those guys control the entire traffic of social media exchange in the country? I mean, what does it do for free speech to have this oligopoly ruling, you might say, over our content? This would be like turning over to 3 telephone companies the control of what is said on the phone, and they would literally be intervening in phone calls, interrupting your content, telling you you could only call certain people but not others, and if you misbehaved, they'd restrict your privileges. I mean, nobody would stand for this. People would go berserk. And yet this is exactly the situation we're facing with digital media. So I think these monopolies and oligopolies are presumptively bad.
So the anti-capitalist critic will say, look, this is what capitalism gave us.
Not necessarily, because capitalism is not step back and do nothing. Capitalism actually, and Adam Smith's actually very clear about this, capitalism is that you need a state that protects the rules of the game. You need the state that breaks up monopolies. You need the state to actively promote competition. You need a state that will enforce contracts, prevent collusion, bribery, price fixing. There's nothing wrong with the state protecting the national interest of the country and saying things like, we don't want valuable medical products being made in China. We don't want valuable defense products being made in Iran or in Russia, for that matter. So all of these things, which appear to be interventions, are nevertheless interventions on behalf of liberty, and that is completely different than interventions that seek to undercut liberty.
Right. So, again, the answer is it's the best system, but just like democracy, it doesn't guarantee, or like freedom, it doesn't guarantee perfect results.
That is very true. I think a capitalist system works well, and this is a point Tocqueville makes in Democracy in America. He goes, capitalism pulls people toward a materialistic conception of life. And he goes, this is actually why Christianity, he calls it the first of America's political institutions. A very strange remark, because Christianity may be about saving your soul or making you more moral or protecting you in the next life, but why would it be the first of our political institutions? And I think Tocqueville's point is the reason it is it acts as a valuable counterbalance to an overly selfish or materialistic conception of life, a life that reduces the value of things just to the monetary value of them. And Christianity is a corrective to that. So clearly, in a healthy society, capitalism isn't the only thing going. Capitalism is in some ways guided and checked by other things.
That's right. We need both.